Happy Monday, kitty cats. And before we get into today's show, I want to remind you once again about an amazing new podcast. I really do mean amazing. I'm not joking around. Called Los Libertinos. It is both on podcatchers as well as on YouTube. It is hosted by my buddy, my homie, Carlos Abelar. And when Carlos invited me on his show, I didn't really know what to think. I kind of thought, okay, I bought CBD from this guy. Seems like a nice guy. I'll go on his show. But I was really impressed by Carlos's approach. He asked me a number of questions that I've just never really gotten before. Not only that, I never really thought about them too deeply before, at least not in the way he was asking them. He does a really unique interview, and he really is trying to do a show that normal people can listen to, which I know can be a challenge when talking to libertarians like myself who just want to rant and rave about every which thing. But Carlos is really able to hone in on certain subjects and talk about things in a way that really is relatable, and I really do appreciate that. So I really want to encourage you to go check out Los Libertinos. Again, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on all your favorite podcatchers. If nothing else, go check out the interview that I did with Carlos Abelar. I will also link to it in today's show notes. Check out Los Libertinos.
We need to empower people with not just the philosophical tools, but the inspiration to break free from the system.
Welcome to the flagship Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly dose of education, inspiration, and real-world application from the top minds in the liberty movement.
If you want liberty, we need to be better leaders, better husbands, better fathers, better friends, better businessmen. We need to be better people.
Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Clair.
Live long and live free.
Here with my guest. His name is Tom Mullen, and we were talking before the show. I think we've probably seen each other's names for over probably a decade now between podcasting. I think you were even around in the Daily Paul days. I remember seeing a lot of your articles, your interviews. Yeah, so we're OGs as far as I'm concerned. But that being said, before I can bring you in properly, Tom, I have to confirm that you are indeed ready to roar.
All right, here goes. I have to use my hand though.
How late were you up last night practicing that? That's what I know.
I was just watching Highlander and listening to that Kurgan guy. That's where I got
nice. Highlander's a classic. Absolute classic. Well, Tom, we have a lot of directions we can go in. We could dive a little bit further into your love of Highlander, but I don't want to get too far off track. So why don't we stick to the liberty stuff right now? Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about your libertarian origin story? When did you first kind of get wind of all this weird liberty stuff? Because like I said, I've been seeing your stuff for probably close to 10 years now.
Well, it's funny. I was in a warehouse. This is right after George Bush got inaugurated, and everybody was arguing about the election. And I, participated in the discussion a little bit. And there was one gentleman there that worked at the same place, and he says, "I got a question for you. What's your political views? What party are you in?" And I said, "I'm not in a party." And I started saying things like, I think, war is a scam. I'm very anti-war. I know this guy's going to get us in another war. This is before 9/11. And I knew he was going to go into Iraq one way or another after, what he had said on the campaign. He goes, "But I don't think the government, and this is my half-baked ideas back then. I don't think the government should be involved in the economy at all. I don't think this and that." And he goes, "Oh, you're a libertarian." And he reaches into his desk and starts handing me magazines, because that's
how you know you met a libertarian. They start handing you literature as soon as they get a glimpse that you might agree with them on something.
And so
just read these 7 books and get back to me tomorrow, and we'll kind of go from there.
So anyway, I before that, I think there's a post from maybe 2011 when I realized I was an anarchist, because I wrote Lou Rockwell a message, which he immediately outed me on, just put it on the internet. But I had, in the 1990s, I had read a whole bunch of founding fathers letters. I'm like, I wonder what these guys had to say. And I, went through the whole Jefferson writings book, and I kept stumbling across John Locke's name. And I'm like, I remember I took a course in college that was about Locke and Rousseau. And I'm like, well, I definitely agree with Locke. This other guy, forget it. So all this jumble of, nonsense was in my head. And then once I heard the word libertarian, I started looking into it. oh, there's a party and everything. And then the first candidate I was really aware of was Michael Bodnarik, like the best one, you know, in 20 years.
That was my first vote for a non-Republican or Democrat. It was Michael. I knew nothing about the Libertarian Party. I just knew that I didn't like these guys, and it was just like I looked him up. I was like, I don't know, it seems kind of weird, but whatever. He's better than these jokers.
Yeah. So, well, and the funny thing is, during the 90s, before I got it all together, I voted for Perot just because I was impressed. Now I'm, you know, getting younger here and into my 20s, but I was impressed with the charts. So he'd bring out the charts, say, well, they bring in this much, and then they spend this much. I'm like,
this guy knows his shit. He's got charts.
Yeah. So I voted for him twice. I didn't know anything about the trade thing. I knew he kept mentioning it, but it was over my head. So, I mean, I can proudly say in my 38-year or 36, whatever it is, voting career, I've not only never voted for a Democrat or a Republican, I've never actually voted for anybody in a general election who went on to win. So I'm blameless and everything, right? So anyway, Bodnarik, you know, I'm like, well, this is great. You know, I know this guy's not going to win, but I can vote for somebody I like now. And then, of course, 2008 rolled around, and you know, I didn't know the Libertarian Party is going to nominate Bob Barr. That was a disaster. But here comes my wife one day, and she says, "Hey, you know, there's a Republican, a Libertarian who's running for the Republican nomination." And I, you know, strut over to my computer so I could prove to this foolish woman that this is a faker she's, you know, being duped by.
Let me guess, you mentioned the free market. I'll dismiss this immediately.
Right. So I Google him and I start reading the website, and I'm like, oh, geez. And then sooner or later, I ran across the Giuliani thing, and I'm like, holy cow, this is, who is this guy? You know, I had never heard of him. So, and I, you know, never really cared that much, but I really thought when I heard him, wow. And he's in the debate, like with the other candidates, and he's on TV and he's saying things I believe in. It was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, I just can't believe this is real. So it got me pretty excited. And I thought, well, what can I do? And I thought I was a good writer, which when I go back and read my stuff from then, I realized I was not. But, you know,
never read your old writing and never listen to your old podcast. These are 2 words of advice I can pass along.
Ignorance was bliss. So I went in full steam, and that's what I did for 10, 12 years as I wrote and somehow Forrest Gump my way into a press pass from the Washington Times to cover his 2012 campaign and the convention. And, you know, I had a blog on HuffPo for a while after the Washington Times thing was over and his political career was over. And lately then writing for Foundation for Economic Education. So I've just been writing in a lot of places, and I wrote 2 books. And I guess the other thing is that for the last several years, I've had a lot of ghostwriting gigs, and I got those because I was pitching my own book. And while I was pitching my own book, they kept telling me, well, you got to start a podcast or something. You can't just write. You can't just write books and expect to sell books. You got to be on TV or something. So
you can't just be guy that wrote a book. You got to be podcaster who also wrote a book, and then maybe we can work with something here.
But I can write them for these other people. So so here I am. That's my story.
All right. Well, fantastic. Well, we are going to talk about one of your books today. This is a little book that you just put together called Anti-State Christmas. And it's sort of an interesting time, especially after the last, 18, 20 months or so. Like I would say that to me, it's been interesting to watch, not in a good way necessarily, but it's been interesting to watch how different communities and groups of people have reacted to COVID restrictions, to lockdowns, to that sort of thing. And I've actually, just as sort of an outside observer, because I've never been terribly religious necessarily, although in the last 1.5, 2 years, I've definitely taken religion a lot more seriously and taken a lot more of an interest in it. But just observing how different religions have reacted, I've seen there's almost a split. It seems like in some sort of churches or maybe some specific communities, that's where you saw the most resistance, like the real resistance, like whether it's Jews in New York City or what have you. And then you also see some other other, I don't know, specific churches or leaders or what have you who are actually fully embracing all of this stuff, who have actually fully embraced like wearing masks, socially distancing at church, things of that nature. So just from my point of view, it's been pretty interesting to watch. So from your perspective, as a religious person, just how did you see all of that as it was unfolding? Just whether it refers first to your own, how your own community reacted, or just how you saw all of this playing out in relation to what's been going on with the COVID regime.
Well, and I'm not particularly religious either. I, have a deep interest in, before the whole political thing, I was deep into the gospel stories and the ancient mysteries and all this stuff. But I do take my mom to church. My mom is going to be 90 next year, and she came to stay with us last year after my father passed away. My father and sister passed away, so we had a tough year in 2019. And she was staying with us, and I was taking her down to the church in Lockport. I shouldn't out this guy, but now I've said it. But I mean, the pastor was like a lot of, I think, modern woke liberal pastors who seem to give you the impression that Jesus was this pushover, this milquetoast. Don't offend anybody, turn the other cheek, be meek. And he did say the meek will inherit the earth, but the Jesus of the New Testament is quite a fiery revolutionary, and he's constantly at odds with the government, the Jewish government, such as it was under Roman rule at the time, the Pharisees and the scribes. I mean, he's born, then the government tries to kill him. I mean, this is just the Jesus that's in the story. And then, once he starts his ministry, they're constantly trying to trip him up so they can charge him with something and kill him. And, he's constantly excoriating the Pharisees. And I guess the thing that's really relevant to what we went through over the last couple of years is the story about the guy with the withered hand. So, Jesus is going to heal this guy's hand. The guy's one big chance probably in all his life. It took you 3 weeks to go 10 miles back then. So he meets Jesus, and the Pharisees come around, or the scribes, I can't remember which, maybe both. And they're, well, you're going to cure this guy on the Sabbath? And so just think about that. Okay, they're going to invoke this regulation.
We're not doing work today.
Yeah, right. And, no, you're not supposed to help this guy. And I'm just thinking like, yeah, you should wear your mask. You should wash your hands. They try to get Jesus on washing his apostles, not washing their hands on another occasion. But you're going to let this guy go untreated, unhealed, because you're just trying to trip up Jesus for political reasons. So, of course, Jesus cures the guy and says it is okay to do good on the Sabbath, right? So it's just it's not too much of a stretch to say, you can't give anybody these treatments. I won't mention what they are. I don't want to get your show canceled, but
we get weekly strikes and bans from YouTube. I mean, it's just right. Say whatever you want is my point, because we're used to it by now, and kind of just have given up on the fact that eventually we won't be on this particular platform, and that's okay. There are others out there that are worthy of our presence.
Certainly. But I mean, in any case, they want the guy to go on suffering and not be cured, so that they can trip him up on this political, attack. So, I mean, it goes all the way through the gospel stories. At the end of Matthew, he lets loose on the Pharisees and scribes. And I mean, he's not even a little bit nice about it. So This is not the, meek, do what you're told kind of Jesus that I think, some pastors want people to emulate. Now, like you said, there were others that said, no, we're not closing. You are not the final authority here. So, it really depends where you are. And some cases it's individual, but, like up where I live in Western New York, I live in Niagara County. It's 2019 here, so we're back to our overtaxed, overregulated lives that we had before 2020.
Good old days.
But you go 5, miles to the south of me into Erie County, and it's like April 2020 again. They've got the mask mandate back, and it's just crazy.
It's wild how big the differences can be, even across very, very short geographic distances, which it's really driving home so much to me how much in culture is important and how much specifically your local culture is important, because that is really going to dictate the world you live in. So you either want to influence it to be more like you want it to be, or you just want to maybe go to a different one, depending on how bad your current situation is/was. Is this part of what inspired you to write the book, kind of seeing these different reactions, seeing, I guess, certain elements of the church or certain proponents of it not exactly acting in what would be the Christ-like manner, I guess? Because saying this as an outside observer, I'm happy to be corrected, but just to me, it seems to me like the whole idea behind Christianity is, here's this guy who basically lived life the exact perfect way you possibly should, and we should do our best to. We're never going to be able to do it exactly, but we want to emulate this method of living, of truth speaking, as much as possible. So did it bother you when you saw certain elements of the church, whether it's certain churches or pastors, kind of acting in the other way, acting almost like the government would be acting if they were just trying to slip Jesus up on a certain, not following a certain regulation or order here and there? Same thing when they're just racing to comply with mask mandates or lockdowns or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and especially the way it came across. Now, if these people firmly believe this, okay, but it just seemed too convenient. I mean, it's like everybody else who just goes along. And I know virtue signaling is an overused term, but I mean, really, I can't think of a better word for, proclaiming to everybody, now, of course, we're going to do what we're supposed to do here, and everybody's going to wear their mask, and we're not, and it's like, do you really believe that this is, especially as you got later into 2020, and it became very apparent that the measures were not doing anything. And if you really looked at data, it started to look like the measures might be making things slightly worse, but at least that there was no correlation. And at that point, I mean, why should we come to your church? We could just go down and listen to the county executive speak, and he's telling us all the same things. And as I said, the Jesus of the Bible is constantly butting heads with the authorities. And even punches Pilate. He basically tells him, "I'm not talking," and he gets acquitted. And then, of course, they kill him anyway because the mob demands it. And that's another subject that's unfortunately topical these days. But
absolutely. I mean, no, that is another reason I think your book is actually really prescient right now, and looking at sort of how Jesus might lead, you might say, a libertarian life or whatever it may be. If anything, it seems more like libertarianism kind of trails behind, the lessons of Christianity in many ways. Like if you're already living a sort of a life similar to Jesus, or living or trying to live your life in that manner, you're already pretty much acting libertarian, and I think, one point you made earlier, it does get confused a lot of times when, I think it really comes down to like sort of how dominant progressivism and leftism has become, to the point that it just seems normal. But this idea that you're supposed to go through life and just politely express your opinions about things, that you're supposed to always be nice to everybody. Look, I'm a nice guy. I try to be nice all the time. But when the shit's getting real, and I would say if things were ever getting real, it's right now, at this moment in history. You're not obligated to be nice about expressing your, whatever it may be, your rights, or, calling out injustices that are going on. And in fact, at least, based on the Gospels and what have you, that is how Jesus lived too. He was not necessarily nice about this stuff. He was actually kind of an asshole to his friends, because he was out there he was more concerned about telling the truth and living in the proper way than about making people feel better about themselves.
I always think of him like my Little League baseball coach when I made what they called the majors in Little League back in the late 70s. So, I mean, this guy was just a profanity driven. I guess that part's not Christ-like, but, he wasn't real nice all the time, but we knew he was beating us up into better players. And, when a compliment was due, he'd give you one. And I mean, nobody on that team wouldn't walk 100 miles for this guy, right?
And it means so much more. I mean, like, I had a similar situation in my high school with my high school wrestling coach, where like I loved the guy outside of practice, but in practice, my God, I feared him. I hated him. I wanted nothing to do with him. But my God, when you did something good, and maybe it's been weeks since you heard something positive from this person, when you did something good and he shook your hand and said, "That was excellent," I mean, that really stood out. That was like, oh, I earned that. Like, I really earned that compliment. So I think it just means so much more, no matter what you're doing in life. I'm not saying go be an asshole all the time, so that it's you really stand out when you're nice. But it's not a bad model to have, especially if you're in the position of trying to teach someone or trying to motivate someone in some way. Again, not advocating being an asshole, but it doesn't mean you need to be all fluffy duffy, all the time.
Well, I mean, especially since this is the most egregious thing I've seen a government do since never in America. Maybe the New Deal, when they were running around, closing businesses that didn't have the Blue Eagle on their door. But nothing in my lifetime has been this totalitarian. And it's not a time to be nice. It's a time to say no. It's a time to say no firmly. What did Jefferson say? Manly firmness. So, I totally agree with that. And the other thing too is this whole idea of like, well, we'll just have to agree to disagree. Okay, so I'm going to agree to not invade your life or possessions, and you're going to agree that you can invade mine. I don't know. Agree to disagree. Shouldn't no money change hands? So it's like, it's funny because we're always expected to be the ones who suffer. Our opinions are always, oh my God, you want to leave people alone? Oh, that's terrible. I mean, in so many words, that's what they say. So it's almost kind of a little bit absurd, really, to say you should be polite or nice about defending what are basic rights, after all.
All right, guys, if you have been hearing the things I've been saying lately, I've been doing a lot of podcast appearances out there. And one thing I've really been emphasizing is that you've got to make plan Bs, plan Cs, plan Ds. You've got to really plan for not just the unexpected, but in many ways, the inevitable. And with everything that's been going on around us lately, with the COVID regime, with vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, all depending on where you live, it's more important than ever to be mobile and to have an idea of what you're going to do when the place that you're currently living just becomes completely unfeasible for you anymore, or when you lose your job or face a mandate you don't want to face. You have to have the ability to go and do something else, and that is why I recommend to everyone to check out my friend Mikkel Thorup on the Expat Money Show. This show has become the #1 resource for me in terms of learning about what I can do to invest overseas, to look at foreign residencies, to have a backup plan, or even a plan A. With everything that's been going on right now, that might be the way you want to look at things. You've got to have an idea about what you're going to do and how you're going to keep yourself and your wealth and your family safe in these trying times. And a lot of people are finding a lot more freedom overseas. I certainly have as of late. So not only do I want you to go ahead and listen to the Expat Money Show, you can find it on your favorite podcatcher. You can also find videos of the episodes over on YouTube at Expat Money. I also want you to go to this special URL because Mikkel is giving away a free infographic report, a free PDF to any of our fans who go over here. So head over to expatmoneyshow.com/lions and get the free infographic report, 19 international strategies to protect and grow your wealth. You will sleep like a baby knowing that no one will ever raid your personal Fort Knox when you use some of the strategies in this infographic. Stop and defend yourself from governments trying to steal your money through taxation. There are just so many tips in this report. You do not want to miss it. So head over to expatmoneyshow.com/lions. Tom, one thing you do in this book, to get into the specifics a little bit more, you look at some of the more like classic Christmas stories. Now, I have like a kind of interesting relationship with Christmas culture, I guess you might say, or Christmas movies or that sort of thing, because I was raised in a Jewish household. So like Christmas was not a thing we celebrated at all, but it was also this thing that I knew all my friends got to do, and that they were always talking about all the presents they got. So then that made me, want to sort of recreate that through Hanukkah, but it was never quite the same. So I was always kind of jealous of Christmas, and I really took on loving Christmas culture. Like I loved Christmas movies. Like, I mean, my favorite to this day, after Thanksgiving hits, I'm like, cool, now I have the excuse to watch the Christmas movies again. Cause I think there is something inspiring just about the idea, it's kind of within us. It is to be helping people or have that sort of, whatever the Christmas cheer is supposed to be. But you actually take up, to coin a phrase, a little bit of a Scroogey approach to a couple of these Christmas movies, and sort of how some of these modern movies, particularly, are sort of sending the wrong message, sending a very different message than maybe whether it's the one Jesus would necessarily send, but it's certainly not a pro-capitalism, not a pro-liberty message. So maybe you can just break down. You kind of you teed up. I had a blast listening to an interview with Tom, because I always love when Tom goes on rants. Especially, I've heard him do this a number of times when he goes on a rant about Charles Dickens. So I'm just going to say, go listen to Tom's interview with Tom. Tom's interview with Tom to hear Tom, the other Tom, rant about Charles Dickens. But I want to get more into the movie It's a Wonderful Life, because you really break this one down. And this is one of those movies that's just top of the list when everybody mentions the Christmas classics. So what is the problem with maybe not the movie itself, but about who the movie is trying to make out to be the heroes and villains?
Well, I mean, we're supposed to, of course, think that Henry Potter is just the most evil man who's ever lived. But, that really isn't based on any facts we get from the movie. I mean, we keep hearing that somehow or other he's oppressing his tenants who live in his houses. And we get this from his chief competitor, the classic limousine liberal George Bailey and his father, who run down Potter as a greedy, evil capitalist, of course, until they need money from him. And, some of the things that squeak through in the movie that you wouldn't necessarily notice right away. I mean, Potter is a part owner of the Bailey business. He's a stockholder. Okay. How did he become one? Well, I mean, it's not a publicly traded company where he just bought shares on the exchange. It looks like the Baileys went to him for money at some point. And then they start running. I mean, then they spend decades really running him down as this evil person. And why? Because the people who live in his houses, which are cheaper, are too smart to go in for the Baileys, Ponzi scheme, their fractional reserve scam to make everybody a homeowner, which of course collapses during the Depression, and I can't do the Jimmy Stewart impression as good as Tom, but George Bailey is like, well, wait a minute, Potter is out there buying, he says Potter's smart. He's buying right now. He's keeping his head. Mm-hmm. Well, why can Potter buy when everybody else is, they're having a run on the bank at the moment. He saves the bank and they're having a run on Bailey's business. Well, because they're fractional reserves. They're a fraud. I think Jimmy Stewart throws in something like, we have 60 days, to try and put a little bit of a different spin on it. But it's not like, Bailey could come up with, everybody's money if he had 60 days or 600 days. Okay. So, there's another way to look at It's a Wonderful Life than the way that, and I should say, as I told Tom, Frank Capra was a rabid anti-New Dealer, and he never voted. He's a Republican, didn't vote for Roosevelt, but he worked with communists all the time. And the two guys who wrote It's a Wonderful Life were communists, and they wanted to portray capitalists as evil. So that's what you get out of It's a Wonderful Life. But at the same time, Bailey's like the good capitalist. He's like, Jeff Bezos, right? Or maybe more like a modern banker. And so, of course, it's noble that he's trying to make a profit. And, no one also notices that he's kind of scamming his fellow townspeople twice, once to save his Ponzi scheme during the Depression. And then at the end, they come and bail him out again. So I don't know why we're supposed to admire this guy. Potter, who's never done anything to anybody, but except keep that $8,000 that the idiot brother Bailey handed to him by mistake. So there's another way to look at It's a Wonderful Life. And, I think that the people who wrote it did not have our best interests at heart.
Yeah, I think there's a reason I never really took too much to that movie. I mean, some of the classics I watch and I'm like, oh, I can see this one. And then, that's just one that, not even thinking about a political level or the capitalism thing, just even as a kid, I just never really liked that movie for some reason. Although, I can never get enough of Jimmy Stewart and that classic voice and everything. Another thing I want to talk about, I do want to touch on Charles Dickens just a little bit man, I'm totally blanking. What is the actual name of the book?
Christmas Carol.
Christmas. I keep thinking Christmas Story in my mind. Christmas Story, but let me just do a little.
No, that's the good one.
Yeah. Christmas Story is actually a good one. Yes. But Christmas Carol, which I think my favorite version is actually the Muppet Show, the Muppet version. But I mean, the portrayal of is it Cratchit is just, it's a theme that we continue to see. And I don't know a lot about Charles Dickens. I assume he had at minimum, communist sympathies, because it is very much similar to an It's a Wonderful Life, where the guy, it is even more extreme. I don't want to channel Tom Woods' rant too much on this, but the guy that's being portrayed as the villain here is basically the one guy that has provided this guy a job for the entire tale. So maybe you can just get into a little bit of the story behind Christmas Carol.
Yeah, and let me right one wrong, because we got to give credit to the great Butler Schaefer, the late great, unfortunately, Butler Schaefer, who wrote the first defense of Scrooge, and I linked to it in the ebook version of my book. I actually used to trade emails with Butler, and he would, even though he was one of the greats, and I'm just some guy from Buffalo, he would always get back to me. And I actually asked him if it was okay if I could do a continuation of what he did, because he kind of does this long courtroom defense of Scrooge, because he was a lawyer. And I asked him if he wanted to do the Potter thing with me, and he said, "No, you go ahead and do it. You're doing fine." So anyway, not to give credit where credit is due, but yeah, I mean, Scrooge, what's he done wrong? What exactly has he done wrong at the beginning of the movie? All we know is he's very wealthy, and he seems to be involved in some kind of finance.
I think that's enough. That's enough for him to be considered a villain.
Right. And I mean, we don't know how many jobs he's created, how many buildings are standing, how much wealth he's created for other people. We know he's still in business, so he hasn't gone out of business. So he must have made a lot of very good financial decisions. And it's the same old thing. His sin is not paying Bob Cratchit enough. Okay. Well, why is nobody else offering Bob Cratchit more? I mean, this is the question through the ages with the socialists. It's like, why is the guy that's paying him more than anybody else on the planet is willing to pay him? Why is that guy the villain? Why, why aren't you paying him more? Oh, you don't have the money. Well, so in any case, yeah. And really, when you look at the story, that's all, it's not just the ghosts. I mean, right away, there's just people at him the whole time, not for his love or his affection or to save his soul, but to take his money. And that's what the spirits really are after. And they kind of terrorize him.
Yeah, they're not even saying necessarily be kinder or like maybe don't be such a jerk. They're just saying, no, give these people all your stuff.
Yeah, right. I mean, and these are supernatural beings which seem to be all powerful, who I assume could be solving some of these problems. They blame Scrooge for, misfortune of people that he doesn't seem to have had anything to do with, other than just being a guy who's successful. So, it's another one of those stories where if you go along with the story and, you could enjoy it as drama, if you start thinking it through, it doesn't really hold up. And you're just, well, wait a minute, So,
are you a fan of the film Scrooged with Bill Murray?
Yeah, when you said the Muppets was your favorite, I immediately was thinking.
I already changed my mind. That's just because I somehow put Scrooge in a different compartment. It's back though. It's number one now. Because in that movie, it actually is more like it should be, because it is more about, Bill Murray's character kind of goes through and sees how he was kind of a jerk in these situations and he did things wrong. And it is more about him actually having a character development. It's not just like, oh, give them all your money.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, let's face it. I don't care if it was pure communism. The line, "that bitch hit me with a toaster." I mean, that's just worth the whole price of admission right there. So yeah, definitely the best version of my book too.
All right, gang, got to take one quick break to tell you about our amazing, wonderful friends and supporters over at Lorenzotti Italy. Lorenzotti Italy is the #1 place for you to stop and order some fine premium Italian coffees delivered right to your door in these neat little tins. And if that wasn't enough, you get to do so knowing you are helping a sponsor of this program. And if that weren't enough, you get to order using your Lions of Liberty discount code. That discount code is ROAR, and it gets you 10% off your order. So head on over to lorenzotti.coffee and use discount code ROAR for 10% off some fine premium Italian coffees. Yummy, yummy, yummy. All right. Well, we don't want to just complain the whole time about Christmas movies. We want to have a little bit more of a positive message. So I just want you to kind of get across, like, what is the impetus behind this book, that like what do you hope people get out of it? Because I think you are doing this for a certain reason, whether it's just a spiritual reason, a cultural reason, or what have you. But there's something you want people to take away from this book, particularly going into the holiday season. So why don't you just pass along Tom's advice for how you could spend, I don't know, a more anti-state Christmas, a more Jesus-ly Christmas, whatever way you want to put a spin on it.
Well, I mean, really, Christmas is the ultimate society, at least in Western culture, right? And I guess the reason I say that is I'm thinking of Thomas Paine, who said society is in every state a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is a necessary evil, and in its worst state, an intolerable one. So he's making the distinction between society and government. And I mean, there's no time that it's more pronounced than Christmas, when politics is over. I mean, thank God Congress goes home. I wish they'd stay home. But, everyone gets back together with their family, their close friends, the real networks, the real strength of society. And, of course, they want to shut it down. And I'm not saying like one of these conservatives, like, they make us say happy holidays. I'm saying they don't want us to do that. And just to celebrate Christmas like you did in 2019 it's like a revolutionary act. So yeah, I want to remind
just to get
people,
together with your family and not ask them about a vaccine would be a revolutionary thing right now.
Yeah. And do not let these people scare you or intimidate you into, throwing away this last vestige of civilization, and, reflect upon how revolutionary the character Jesus was, and don't fall for any of these communist Christmas specials either.
All right, Tom. One more thing I want to touch on before we drop off here is you have a very particular drink that you give the recipe for in this book. We're not going to give out the recipe itself because we want people to actually go get the book and check it out. But I'm just curious if you can give us the story around that drink and maybe just describe it for us. That would be a nice way to wrap things up. And I might even go make myself one when we're done here.
Yeah, it'll take you a little while. I was in the hearing aid business in the 2000s, and I used to go to Germany a lot. And the manufacturer, we were importing German hearing aids. So one year I was there in like mid-December, right before Christmas. And, the company took me out to an authentic German Christmas market in Hamburg and introduced me to this great drink. And what they do there is you go to the markets and they're all kind of outdoors, they're like stalls. And even though it's, a little chilly, I'm from Buffalo, so, so you go to shop and they've got traditional stuff like the roasted almonds and all the traditional German things. And then you go out to like, what would be the parking lot, and they have barrel fires, like that people are standing around drinking what they call Glühwein, which is glow wine, or what we call mulled wine. So I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I got to get, this. So I wanted to get like an authentic recipe, and then I got one, and then I, didn't like the way it came out for me. So I fiddled around with it till I got it to the way I liked it. So I put that in the book saying, look, as part of the whole thing, you should probably make some Glühwein and, stand outside around a fire and talk some treason.
Well, it sounds fantastic to me. It is a little bit of work. Maybe I won't do it right now, but it's sometime in the next few weeks when I'm settled back in, I'll have to check it out because it does sound pretty good. Tom, before I let you go, of course, just give everybody the full summary of all the best ways they can find your book, as well as all of your other work. You are recently got into the podcasting game as well, so let them know how they can find all the Tom Mullen projects.
Well, to get the book, you just sign up on my email list by going to antistatechristmas.com, and that'll take you to a place where you can download the book for free. It's also available by paperback, and there's a link there at the same place. Very inexpensive. It's a short book, so I wanted to make it, inexpensive, unlike everything else thanks to our wise overlords, everything else is going up this year. So you can go to antistatechristmas.com. My podcast is at tommullentalksfreedom.com, and you can also sign up to get the book there. So any way you go, you'll end up at tommullentalksfreedom.com.
All right, Tom Mullen, thanks so much for joining me. Nice to finally make your acquaintance. Keep up the great work. Keep on roaring, and of course, have a wonderful anti-state Christmas.
You do the same, Mark. Thank you.
All right, gang, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tom Mullen. I literally remember seeing this guy's articles about the Ron Paul campaign way back in the early Daily Paul days when we were posting our articles over there before we even had a podcast. So it's just another one of those guys where we go way back, yet we never actually talked before. So it's one of those weird things. It was really nice to finally get to talk to Tom Mullen. Be sure to check out his book, Anti-State Christmas. And friends, I've just got a couple days away from heading to Sayulita, Mexico, the land that COVID has hardly ever touched, or at least we're going to use that in the marketing. But you really do not expect to see any kind of masks or anything like that. You do not need a test to go to Mexico. You do not need to take a vaccine to go to Mexico. You're probably not even going to have to wear, I don't want to make a guarantee, you might need to wear one in Uber, but for the most part, you shouldn't have to wear a mask anywhere at the hotel or anywhere at this event. It is the Sayulita Super Spreader. That is Sayulita, Sayulita. Head over to sayulitasuperspreader.eventsmart.com. Get your tickets right now if you haven't. It's really not hard to get there. If you want some tips, reach out to me. You can hit me up on Twitter at Marc D. Clair, M-A-R-C, the letter D, Claire, C-L-A-I-R. Slide into those DMs is probably the easiest way to reach me. Or drop me an email, Marc, M-A-R-C, at lionsofliberty.com. But this is being put on by our good friend Johnny Perfida of the Peddling Fiction Podcast. And we're going to have a bunch of Liberty podcaster types there, including myself, of course, Buck Johnson from Counterflow, Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown, James Guzman from the Borderless blog and podcast. It's going to be a blast. And of course, I guess they're calling him the headliner. I don't know, but this guy, you may have heard of him. No, it's Robbie the Fire Bernstein will be headlining this event with a stand-up comedy set and a live podcast. You are not going to want to miss it. If that all wasn't enough, guess who's going to be doing a little, very brief opening stand-up comedy set for Mr. the Fire. Mr. the Fire, it is myself, Marc Clair. I'll be doing a very rare stand-up comedy set that you have to come to Sayulita to see in person. That's the only way you're going to be able to get it. So head over to sayulitasuperspreader.eventsmart.com. Anthony Samaroff, he's the other one. I knew when I was listing those names, I knew there was someone I was forgetting. Anthony Samaroff of the Scottish Liberty Podcast will also be there. And I believe it's actually his promo code, even though, I should get credit if you buy it. But Red Bill is his promo code. That one is currently still active. So you can go use that one to get 10% off your tickets. But I really do hope to see you there. I'm heading there in just a couple days. Come join us for some sun, some tequila, some fun, some live podcasting, and just a normal freaking time at a fun, inexpensive beach town without a bunch of Karens screaming at you to put your mask on. I can't not wait. But if you're not going to be seeing me in Sayulita, then there's something else you should be doing, and that is attending my friend Jason Stapleton's virtual event called Discover 2022. And guess what? It's completely free. Unlike Sayulita, you do got to buy tickets for that one. It is completely free to attend. It's an online webinar where Jason is going to help you guys unlock your hidden talents, skills, passions, and abilities that you need to increase your income and your impact in 2022. Jason has been a big influence on me. I've been a part of his Nomad network, have made some incredible connections through there. And quite frankly, a lot of his podcasts, especially when he made that turn, really did help motivate me a little bit and get me more on the path to where I am right now, where I do have multiple income streams, multiple entrepreneurial endeavors that I'm working on. So I can personally attest that Jason's a great guy and someone that you can really learn from, because he really does know what he's talking about. So I want you to head over to stapletonagency.com/discover-lions. That's stapletonagency.com/discover-lions. I will, of course, link to that in today's show notes as well. My friends, that is all I've got for you for this week. Until next time.
Live long and live free.